Hi there, Jackie Trujillo here with Gallery 1 and your Comics Art2GO kit. First thing we're going to go over is your materials and all the stuff that's going to come in your kit so you know what to expect and how to use them. Then we're going to jump into instruction on a one-point perspective, specifically if you were in a really big city and you were looking up at all of the tall buildings. It's a very specific view and it's included in a lot of comics, so I hope you enjoy it. Alright, first thing, let's go over your materials. I'm going to shift my camera down so you can see what I'm looking at. So hold tight. Okay, fantastic. First thing you're going to get in your kit is a nice mechanical pencil. This is really nice because it's going to stay sharp so that you don't have to keep resharpening it. You can just keep drawing and keep going, which is really important when you are doing comics, especially if you get on a roll. You don't want to have to stop. Next thing you're going to get is a nice Sharpie, okay, fine point, so that you can do really nice details. Inking is super important with comics, keeps things nice and crisp, gives it that nice illustrated style. Okay, the next thing you're going to get is a high polymer eraser, really nice for getting all of that graphite off when you're ready, even works in colored pencils. You're also going to get a nice ruler of a different color. This color specifically is blue, but you might end up with another color. You're also going to get a cool sketchbook as well. Alright, for right now, for the start of our one-point perspective, the only thing I'm going to need is the ruler and the mechanical pencil. Okay, we're going to just use these two things, the ruler and the mechanical pencil, just to get started. I'm going to show you an example of what the project is going to look like. That way you can kind of know what to expect and how to do it. Okay, then bring this in. Okay, as you can see, I have done some nice coloring on it. I've given it a little bit of some character, tried to do different types of buildings, made it nice and fun. Nobody wants to do just all gray buildings. That's not fun. So I made sure to use lots of colors and make it look really nice. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go over is specifically how to do one-point perspective. Alright, so once you have your paper ready, got your mechanical pencil, first thing we're going to do is we're going to select a center somewhere near center, and we're going to put a dot. I'm not going to press too hard because I am going to want to erase this. Hopefully you can see that right there that I did. It's not directly center of my page, but it's pretty close. You can see that hopefully. Nice and straight there. Okay, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to talk about two types of lines. One of those is converging, the other is parallel. If you refer to your kit booklet, it'll show you what the two different lines mean. And it's important to know the difference so that we make an accurate one-point perspective. Okay, converging lines are lines that go towards something. So imagining if you are looking on a railroad track and those lines are all going to look like they're converging to a specific point. Okay, that's because they are. That's what is happening with perspective. The perspective, also known as your vanishing point here, is where your eye level is. Everything that is moving is going to go towards this specific spot. Think of this as like your GPS coordinate. It's going to show you where you are, height and width. Okay, so this is where you're looking. As if you could shoot lasers, this is right where your eyes would be. Okay, the other type of line we're going to work with is parallel lines. Now, parallel lines are two lines that are never going to cross. We're going to be working with parallel lines that, one, run parallel to the top and bottom of our page, as well as parallel lines that run with the sides of our page. I will define these as we get closer to them, but just keep in mind parallel lines never touch. So if my line were right here on the edge of my page, I would need to make sure it was exactly straight so that it didn't ever cross. And then I could do a parallel line that would be parallel to this. Converging are all going to look like they're going to go right to the same point. So those are very important, but they're very different. Alright, we're going to start with one building here at the bottom. Hopefully you can see this. I'm going to switch the camera around so you can see it from the drawing perspective. There we go. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line up my ruler with my vanishing point to the bottom of the page. Somewhere in there. I don't want to go all the way to the edge, and I don't want to go straight down. I'm going to go out just a little bit. And now I'm not going to start all the way up here because I don't want the building to take up the whole space. But I'm going to start maybe a little bit down from there, and I'm going to draw a line. Okay, notice that that one is going to converge towards our vanishing point. It is not parallel. The next one I'm going to do is create the other side of my building. Okay, I'm going to decide how wide I want it to be here. Then the next thing I'm going to do is line it up with my vanishing point. Start at approximately where my other line stopped and draw the rest of that converging line. Now you can see I have at least the start of the building. Here's where our first parallel line comes in. Okay, we're going to do a parallel line that is parallel with the bottom and top of our page. Okay, you can make this as specific as you'd like. If you want to make sure it is 100% straight, what I would suggest doing is making sure you have little tally marks on your side of your page. So if I wanted to make sure it went directly there, I'm going to make a little tick mark here, making sure it's completely lined up, and make it the same spot on this side. Exact same spot. If it's not, then it will not be straight. Okay, now I have two little tick marks on the side. Now I can line my ruler up with those two things and get a perfectly straight line. Now I'm going to use the ruler to my advantage here, and I'm going to actually use that line and create my parallel using the bottom side of my ruler. So I didn't want it up here. That's a little too high. But based on where I put my tick marks, that's where I wanted to go. Now I'm going to erase those extra little lines there. So you should still be able to see your nice building format. Okay, now because these two are going directly in line with my point, there actually isn't going to be any drop down lines that I can visibly see that are parallel to the sides of my page. It's only when we move out from that one point perspective directly away from our vanishing point that we will actually start to see those. Okay, next thing we're going to do, we're going to add another building here. Same way, we're going to add a converging line to our vanishing point. I'm not going to make it the same size as this building because that's no fun. I want to do some different variety. So I'm going to widen it a little here at the bottom, make sure it's still lined up, and I'm going to make a nice little short building right here. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Now again, I want to make sure that I do a nice straight line. So I'm going to do, again, those tick marks so that I know I get a perfectly straight line. I'm going to make sure that I'm measuring it correctly. I'm going to go up 8 centimeters on this side, make a little tick mark, do the exact same, making sure I'm lining up my ruler the exact same way every time. Consistency is what's going to make it actually work. Okay, again, 8 centimeters, move it across. Now I can get a perfectly straight line right here. Okay, draw that corner. And I'm going to put this building right up against this other one, just so that there's no space in between. Sometimes they put buildings right next to each other. Sometimes there's a little space. Well, let's add another building over here that does have space. Okay, so let's say there's like another gap here, maybe a little alleyway in between these two buildings. So I'm going to put my line again. I'm not going to go right up against the other one. I'm going to give a little breathing room. Line up my ruler right up to my vanishing point. I'm going to make it a little taller, maybe a medium between the size of these two buildings. Draw my line. Okay, you notice all my converging points are going to the same area. All my parallel lines are going to never touch each other. Okay, now we need to add the other side of our building. So I'm going to measure it out maybe a little farther than the edge of the page, just so that I get a little variety. So notice I'm not going here. I'm moving it out a little bit because this is going to be a unique type of drawing, and it's exactly how I see the city. It's not necessarily how the person next to you sees the city. Okay, so then I'm going to draw my line. Okay, I went a little high there on this side, but that's okay. Can always erase. Alright, so then I'm going to make another tally mark for myself. I'm going to go on this side because I can actually see somewhat where I need to go. Okay, from the bottom, if I put it on the centimeter side, I can go up 12 centimeters. So make a little tick mark on that 12 centimeter line. I'm going to go over here, do the exact same thing, making sure it's all lined up right where it needs to be. 12. Making a little tick mark, nothing too heavy, so that way I can erase these later. Line it up again, making sure I get that perfectly straight line. Now, if you don't want to do these on the side, that's totally fine. You can make sure, you can eyeball it and make sure it looks straight. It doesn't have to be perfect. That is totally up to you. This is just a way to make sure it looks exactly right. Now, the next thing we're going to do, this is where it gets a little different. This is where we get one more step. That's another type of parallel line, but it's going to be parallel to the sides of our page rather than the top and the bottom. Now for this one, I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm not going to make any marks. I'm just going to go for it. So what I'm doing when I'm eyeballing it is I'm making sure that the distance from this end of my ruler to the page is the same distance as it looks from up here to the edge of the page. Okay, so then I'm going to line that up as best as I can. Thankfully, I don't have a ton of space right here, and I'm going to draw from right there at the corner straight down. And there's the edge of my building. Now it looks like this one's a little bit in front, and that there's some space in between there. Okay, hopefully you're with me so far. Now, because of this method of one-point perspective, we're going to do the same thing all the way around. But the good thing is we can just rotate our page, repeat the same process. It's going to look the exact same. The perspective has not shifted. So let's do a building down here. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, make sure I'm lined up against my vanishing point. Same distance every time, and giving it some building. Okay, let's make this one a nice wide building down here at the bottom, and break it off there. Okay, now again, we're going to go back and we're going to do a horizontal line that's parallel to the tops and bottom. Instead of doing the tally marks, I'm just going to do an eyeball again, and what I can do is also line up my centimeter lines here. But if you want it to be perfect, measure it up on both sides, draw that line across. Okay, I'm just going to do my best here, eyeball it, make sure it looks good. Typically, with this amount of space, you can't go too far wrong. Alright, now I can also have the opportunity to do that other type of parallel line that's going to go straight down. Now this is again where you want to make sure that you're nice and straight. So for this one, I'm going to give it a nice straight line, hopefully in line and parallel to the sides of my page here. And on that corner, so I know that I can create the rest of that building, I'm going to go down a little bit. Not all the way, so that way I have a little bit more space here. Now this one, I'm going to go from this corner to the bottom. I'm going to make sure I'm lined up here and lined up here. And I'm going to add a third converging line. Now those are going to seem really similar, but that's how the rest of the building is finished. Okay, let's do a couple more over here. Just some quick ones. Alright, so make sure I'm lined up all the way across. Imagine as if these buildings were across the road and you're looking at them still straight up from the sky. Okay, lined up with my horizon line, vanishing point, giving that converging line in. Okay, now I'm going to do another parallel line from the bottom, which was the side of our page, now is the bottom. I'm going to line that up nice and carefully. You can use the ruler to do this. You can make the tally marks, or you can just eyeball it. Now I'm just going to eyeball this one. I keep making sure that I'm making the same consistent lines. Okay, now I have another building there. Let's also add the side to this one. So if I go straight down, this one's going to need to be a parallel to the other sides of my paper. And I'm going to go straight down. And this one, I'm going to go pretty far down. And then I'm going to finish that one line one more time, lining it up here at the bottom, lining it up with my vanishing point, and adding the rest of that converging line in. And there we go. Those two buildings look awfully similar. That's okay. I'm going to draw one more building over here real quick, just so that we can keep moving forward, and then I'll show you how to draw a couple of other fun things. We're going to move into windows and other types of fun buildings. This one, we're going to do a little different. We're going to make it into like some kind of rounded edge building. So I'm going to put it a little closer to this one. I'm going to draw my converging line. I'm going to make it a little taller than that one, just a little bit. Move this one in, straight from that vanishing point, and then go out from there. Kind of looks like a silly building at this point, but don't worry, it'll start to look more together soon. Gonna finish that parallel line off again. And then I'm going to go straight down from that corner, add a parallel line from the sides of my page, and go down, and then finish off my my converging line. Going to my vanishing point, lining it up here with the bottom of my page, finishing it off. Now I have a really cool building here. Now this one I said I was going to do a little differently, so I'm actually going to erase this line now that I have it there and you know what it needs to look like. And instead of making it straight, I'm going to make this building like it has a rounded facade, which is the front part of the building. So I'm going to give it a roundedness. I don't need to use the ruler for this because it's not going to make any kind of rounded corners. And just do something like that. And that's all you need to do. And then we'll move on to windows. So let's go back to our first building that we did here. Now typically there's lots of windows on these big skyscrapers. Something really interesting with architecture is they figured out that all of the main pressure points are on the sides of the building. Therefore, all of this space can be opened up in windows, which let in a lot of natural light. And before we had electricity, that was really important that you could let in natural light. Alright, so I'm going to go into the building now, and I'm going to make those same types of lines, converging and parallel, but they're going to be inside, and they're going to be creating information. So I'm going to go just slightly in from that building edge, and draw myself another converging line. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, trying to keep it about the same distance, just so it looks nice and uniform. And draw that converging line. Okay, hopefully you're with me still. Then we're going to draw some parallels. Okay, we're going to draw a couple different types of parallels. And because I still have my tick marks down here, I'm going to use those to my advantage and line it up, draw a parallel line. And because I have a really nice straight edge ruler, I'm still lined up, I'm going to actually draw another one on the bottom half of it. So I'm using the same mark, the same location to create two different marks. Makes it nice and easy and fast. Okay, line it up with some of those other tick marks that I did. And I'm going to do a couple more parallel lines. Okay, with me so far, these look like big windows. And that's okay. We'll make them a little bit smaller. Okay, now I'm going to keep going and making some more parallel lines. You can make these specifically spaced. Maybe you want some really long, wide windows. Maybe you want some shorter windows. Either way, it's totally fine. You get to choose how you want it to look. I'm just going to keep going and making some cool windows that start to look maybe like a checkered board. adding these parallel lines. They're all going to be parallel to each other, so none of these should ever cross and look like they're going to turn in on the other one. They're going to get tighter and closer together up here, so I'm going to leave them a little bit more spaced out as they move down here. That'll also give the perspective that it is moving away from us. Okay, get that nice and lined up. The do line there, line on the bottom, and I'm going to call that good. Maybe I'll do one more in here. Yeah, let's do one more in here. Okay, now I have at least part of my window panes. Now I could leave that. Those are pretty cool windows. But I think I'm going to segment them so that I have more windows, as if this were like a big office building and all of these people wanted to have a nice window in their office. So to keep it nice and even, I'm going to go right down the center of this building, or as close to center as I can, and I'm going to draw another converging line that'll be the side window panels. Okay, now I have it sected into two, so bisected there, but I'm going to actually make 4 sets of windows. So I'm going to half each of those halves as well. Okay, now I have these cool types of windows, nice and bright, and there we go. And then you can make some of these darker, you can make some of them thicker, you can add little people in there, maybe somebody has a desk right at the front, maybe Spider-Man is in there. This is where you get to have fun and change it and make it your own. Okay, let's come over here. How are we going to do some rounded edged buildings? Okay, now instead of making straight lines like we have been, we're actually going to make it still parallel, but it's going to be parallel to this rounded one instead. So I'm going to just use some freehand here, no ruler needed, and just start making some really cool rounded edges here. Giving it that same arc, at least trying as best I can to keep it the same distance. This will just give it a little bit of a different look and make it look like a cool building. I would definitely like to live in this building. Now maybe we wanted to give it a little bit more of some paneling, and we can do that. We still just got to add some more converging lines. So let's make this one a 3-part instead of 4. So I'm going to guess about a third of it, make that converging line, guess about another third, make that next converging line. And voila, we have a rounded facade building. We could also round it here if we wanted to, but to keep things a little bit more consistent, we'll give it a nice flat edge, which is the rounded front. Okay, now some other things you can do. Say we want to add an antenna. Some of these buildings have big antennas for broadcasting, so let's make this building like a broadcasting building. Now the antenna is going to come from the center of the building, right, very tip top, and it's also going to converge to our vanishing point. So you can see that, and it's going to point right at it, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a triangular look, just so it looks like one, and then I finish that off with a little bit of a tiny little parallel line. And voila, I have a nice antenna. Okay, well, what if I want to do a stack building? Stack buildings happen where they have different tiers. So let's make this one a stacked building. All right, so let's go just slightly in. So we're looking at this distance here. Now let's just go slightly in on one side, making sure, again, I'm pointed directly at that vanishing point, making sure I'm lined up here before I make any marks. And then let's give it a little bump. Okay, I'm going to draw that in, go in slightly, about the same distance here on this side, and go to converging point. Going about the same height and distance as this other one. Okay, now there should be a third line in here somewhere, but it's actually going to be behind this building, so we're not going to worry about that. Thankfully, if we have more stuff, the less things we have to draw. Okay, so then I'm going to add in that parallel line, draw that up, erase my little corners here, making sure I get nice edges, going straight down, getting another parallel that is from the sides. Essentially what I'm doing is making sure I create little 90-degree angles. This is a 90-degree angle, this is a 90-degree angle right here. Let's see, this one is a 90-degree. Even though it's got the rounded look there, this one will be a 90-degree. We don't see them all the time, especially if there are other buildings blocking the way, but in this case we do see it a few times. So I'm going to drop that down, making sure I'm parallel, creating that little 90-degree. Now this building has a little stack on it. I could keep going, or I could keep stacking and stacking, but I'm going to call that good. But right here, let's say I wanted to make some kind of like observation deck where people could go out onto it and look at the city. Well, you got to have a guardrail. Got to keep your people safe. So I'm going to add a little line there. I'm going to add a little line over here, again making sure I'm constantly checking my converging lines, making sure I'm not doing anything wrong. Okay, I'm going to add a parallel line here at this bottom. I'm going to add a parallel here so that we have the rest of that guardrail. And now I can even go back in and create these little railings. Keeping it stuck on my vanishing point, it's becoming like a pivot point at this point. Making sure that it stays on there. All of these are going to go to that same point. Even though they look parallel, they're so little, they are converging. And these are going to converge on this side. So I make sure that I get a converging line there, converging line there, and converging line there. Now I have this cool little observation deck. I could even draw a little person in there if I wanted to. I could make these thicker. I could make them wider. I could add more. I can add windows here. I can make sure I continue to make this as fun and as unique and exactly what I want it to look like. I'm going to show you again my example just on some ideas that you can do with it. Okay, like I said, here's a stacked building. Those are really fun. I did a 3-part stack. I made sure to do lots of windows, some with very few windows. These ones have vertical windows. These ones have horizontal windows. These ones have little balconies. Those are just tiny little converging lines and parallel lines that come off the building. As long as you understand the difference and know where to put them, you can make it exactly and as complex or advanced as you want. So I have 2 different types of rounded edge buildings. I have this one that's almost all glass, and this one that's just got these big gold windows. Okay, and then with these windows that are super, super big and that take up most of these buildings, they're going to be pretty reflective. So I made sure to keep this the same color as the sky so that it looked like it was reflecting some of those clouds. Makes you really feel like you're in the city. So here's where I did those guardrails before, and then just have fun coloring it. Make sure that you make it your own city. It doesn't have to be a specific place. It can be anywhere that you want it to be. And this is how you get going. Now when you want to make sure you have smooth edges and everything is nice and crisp, you can use your pencils really hard. Start building lots of layers of color and then blend it out nicely. Colored pencils can make anything look really nice as long as you take your time. And